We have some roving microphones with Matthew and William. So if we could take some questions from the floor, I'm sure we have some tables. First one, first served. Anybody? Hands up for one of the tables. Aoife, over at Aoife's table. We start off there.
So we did a couple of questions. One about whether any of the companies had an intention to extend their impact into the supply chain, so a move towards a more vertically integrated supply chain as a way of, reducing impacts. Another around what zero waste actually means. And a third one around, is zero waste the right sort of big audacious goal, and if it's an intermediate one, what actually is the right goal? So is it zero net resource use, or is it something else? And what your thoughts were on that?
Okay, so three questions. Vertical integration, is that part of the answer? And then two questions on zero waste. Should we start with those zero waste ones? Tony, do you want to kick off, and then David and Matt do join in?
Sorry. Remind me the first zero waste question.
So what do we really mean by zero waste? Okay. And then the second one is that just an intermediary goal? Should we be looking for something beyond that?
Sure, okay. So with regards to the first question, interestingly, you will all know no global standard exists for waste to landfill, but we're very clear about ours. So when we talk about zero waste to landfill, we're saying zero non-hazardous waste to landfill. And people that operate in some difficult countries will know in some countries we have to put hazardous waste in some areas. So in South Africa, food waste is hazardous above a certain moisture level into the landfill that we have to put it into. Yeah. So of course we're working to avoid that. So our definition, zero non-hazardous waste to landfill, is no landfill, no incineration without energy, so it has to have a purpose, which differs from one organisation to another. And within that, we're actually working on what's the most valuable element of what we do with the waste we generate. So you'll remember I spoke first about let's reduce that waste at source, and that will come back on the second question. But for us, the highest value when something leaves our sites, let's make sure it hits reuse. And we all do it today, actually, because you think about pallets. Think about pallets. So if we didn't reuse pallets in a pallet pool, that would actually be waste. You would recycle it. But the fact that these pallets go around hundreds, I'm not an expert on pallets, but go around hundreds of times is a great reuse example. And we have to kind of, transform the way we think about waste and get more of those going. So that's our definition of what's zero landfill. And lots of people would also ask, are you sending, what about the UK, how much are you sending waste to energy? Is this the way you did it? Less than 1% waste to energy in the UK. We still have some difficult bits and we put it waste to energy, but you can over-intellectualise about this definition, or you can do something about it. And as I say to people, the first flight didn't go across the Atlantic. What we did absolutely isn't perfect, but we've made a flight and help us to improve it. Okay. And then, sorry, the second question.
So is this just an intermediary step? Yeah. So what should you really be aiming for?
So I think that's a great question. This is absolutely an intermediary. And I said earlier, don't celebrate too wildly the fact that we generated lots of waste and then say, but we recycled it all. So we're 13% down versus 2008, and one of the hottest buzzwords at the moment is circular economy and so on. That's why I think we should actually only be allowed to mention those words if we can come with an example of it. And my vision would be to make some of our factories, everything that comes in either goes out in a product or goes back to the supplier. I mean, probably the easiest things we can do is get this circular back to the supplier. It's really worth a lot of money as well. Boxes. Why can't it come in a cage and not a box? Go backwards and forwards. And the quality people will tell you, well, it's because of this. Remember, how can we? Let's get a nice aseptic layer around it, whatever we do. So it's absolutely a first step. And keep watching the news.
Okay. David, do you have a different definition of zero waste? And is it intermediary or?
No, I would say it's similar. So we operate not in some of the countries that Tony is, so it's Northwest Europe. But I would say, not zero waste to landfill, that's clear. That's a clear indication. I think where we focus on now is is actually eliminating any waste at all. And I talked earlier about collaboration, and that's where we're working with the suppliers. So do we need to put layer pads on? Do we need to shrink wrap pallets when they come into the facility? So and with customers, sorry, I should say with customers as well. So can we take some of that packaging, that secondary packaging out? Can we remove some of the stuff so it doesn't become waste material at any point in time? And the second one is collaborating with our waste management companies. I think CETA are here, and other companies, finding ways in which we can improve on the reuse of some of the materials. So an example would be if we have PET bottles in our facility, if we don't use them, we can shred. So if they become not in the production line, we can shred them and put them back into the process and reuse that. So I think the key is now it's moved on from, I think we're all agreed we don't want waste. It's about how do you not just avoid landfill, but actually stop the waste generation itself, which I think is similar to what Tony was saying.
Yeah. Matt, do you have a different perspective, or you don't? You can move on to the next question if you want.
Can I move on to the next?
Yeah, about vertical. Yeah, go on. So the question really was: is I need to be thinking about reintegrating parts of your supply chain as a way of managing risk, costs, and impacts. And is that a practical possibility?
I'll talk about one of our products in India, Horlicks. We have approximately 30,000 dairy farmers that feed a number of milk collection centres. Those milk collection centres then cool and refrigerate the milk and then supply them to our factories. And there's huge pressure in India on milk and milk supply. I think annual milk price inflation is about 13% a year. The Indian government has an aspiration to, and I think they've achieved it now, stop importing milk products from abroad and develop their internal market. And that means now that supply is constrained, for want of a better word. They're reliant on domestic market. So there's some innovation appearing in that supply chain. And GSK has to ask itself the question, are we good at working with farmers, and what do we know about milk production, etc. So I think there's a real challenge. I think it comes back to I think it was your point earlier, Martin, which was what are we good at and what should we stick to, what's our core business? And I think what we're good at is not milk farming, but what we are potentially good at is linking up those disparate parts of the supply chain together. So we've moved away at one of our facilities from being vertically integrated, and we've now increased the number of tier one suppliers, but we've maintained the links back to the farmers, and we're working with the farmers to understand and help mitigate their water impact, their carbon impact, to help them with access to feed, fodder, veterinary care, etc. So I think that the question is probably a bit too black and white. I think there's a mixed model to fix that.
Very good. Another question? Yes. Well, we'll do that table there first, William, and then we'll come to team whatever it is. I can't see the badge. Alison's table. Okay, 10. So we'll do this one over here first.
It's a question around collaboration. How can you
Simon, sorry, could you just say who you are first?
Sorry, it's Simon Brown here from ADEC Innovations. Question is, how can you separate out the pre-competitive areas where people are open to collaboration from concerns about losing competitive advantage?
Who wants to have a go? Go on then.
So it's a really good question, and that's how we started the conversation, where we had a number of our suppliers not wanting to collaborate for fear of the competitive environment, and particularly in some of the big packaging companies where clearly there's a market share type discussion going on. But I'm really pleased to say that evaporated fairly quickly, because I think if the stakeholders within the supply chain embrace sustainability at the right level within the organisation, then it doesn't become a competitive issue. It becomes a collaborative issue. And actually, we're just talking how can we do more of that within industry as well? Because it's only together that we will be stronger than if we operate in separate parts. And I mentioned that we have these supplier webinars, and it's great. We have all of our competitive suppliers, whether it's cans, bottles, glass, in the same room talking about the same things. And in fact, we encourage them as groups to talk to each other about sustainability, because it isn't really a competitive issue if you take it off the table and say it's actually part of doing business and actually wanting to achieve, let's say, new goals in the future as an industry and as a collaborative connection with your suppliers and stakeholders.
It's beautiful, really, because you've done exactly what I said we do. You've given lots of reasons why we can't do it. So I challenge back, how can we do it? And I give you an example. The easiest collaboration organisations find to sit together on is something like safety. Yeah? So Unilever sits with P&G, with Nestle, on safety. And the reason we do is because we know why we sit together on safety. Yeah? Because we care about our people. We don't want fatalities in our organisations. So I challenge back round and ask the question again, how can we make it happen? And let's understand why we must make it happen.
I suppose my view would just be clear about what you're collaborating on, and there are pretty clear antitrust rules around what you can and can't talk about, and if you avoid those, then pretty much, if you're willing, you can discuss anything, and a lot of the themes that run through sustainability, everyone faces the same challenges, so you can legitimately have that conversation and address some of those issues. So I think just be brave, work with your legal team. We had to. Took a long time to get over the concerns and set a clear framework for the discussions.
Yeah. Well, Jim, we'll come to table 10 in a second, but certainly I don't know if you feel the same about it, but it seems to me that sustainability is one of those lenses that gives permission to people to have conversations they wouldn't otherwise have. And it comes back, I think, Tony, to your idea that the heart of all of this is the motivating why, the business with purpose that you're able to tap into. That means, in fact, you can deal with and address things which are probably very mundane operational issues which could be done better, but you'd never get to talking about how they could be done better if it wasn't for the permission that sustainability gives you.
I'd like to say one thing.
Yes, of course you can, and then we'll go to table 10.
Just one thing, sorry. So, my little Holly said it will not be easy, but she also said, but it will be worth it. Okay.
Hello, Anne-Marie Bruder from Forum for the Future. My question is, how do you present, you're all in very large companies, how do you present a joined-up approach to your supply chain? And I'm thinking in particular about, you could discuss with your, suppliers some brilliant sustainability initiatives that you're going to work on together. And at the same time, they might well be saying, yes, but we're getting completely squeezed by your buyers. And we do have experience of talking to companies who experience this problem, who are pushed around implementing sustainability initiatives, but at the same time, are also squeezed by the buyers. So how do you present that joined-up approach within your own very large organisations?
For me, you have to follow the path of least resistance. And what I mean by that is we're not going to talk about everything immediately. But for example, for us on Zero Landfill, we made a commitment, it's in writing, where we said we'll share with our suppliers and so on and so on. In, I believe, June of this year, we'll pull them together and we'll share a framework with something to take away where people can do that. So it's one example, and that's why I say we sometimes choose to try and follow a difficult path, and it can take our energy and prove to us that things aren't possible. But the way you can open collaboration sometimes is to start in a way where you can do it and people do want to do it, and suddenly new relationships develop, is from my perspective.
David, can I ask you to take this question next? Just because if I'm not being too forward, you're probably at the sharp, pointy end of this question and this dilemma.
Yeah, okay. So we need to recognise, obviously, we're a business, we're a large business, and obviously we need to ensure that we have a competitive supply chain. But I don't think the two are disconnected. I think you can have the conversation and you can also talk about sustainability and talk about the end-to-end supply chain and the value you can get from that. So there are two things. I would say there are a number of areas of sustainability that can be cost beneficial. And we've seen that in the past. Reducing the weight of the package is cost beneficial. So new technology to do that, investing in that, might mean that a supplier would gain incremental business because they're investing behind technology. So that would be one area. I think the other area is as I said, we've made a commitment to sustainability, so you have to look at it at a broader scale rather than saying individual negotiations. You need to look at it as a business to ensure that overall you're managing your costs, but within that you're accepting that there may be variations to ensure that you have sustainable sourcing or sustainable packaging. And I'm pleased to say within CC we have CEO support. For example, on capital expenditure, we will divert capital to sustainable projects which wouldn't have the same return necessarily as a normal business requirement that has, let's say, 15% ROI. So that's good news. So we've got that, plus the fact we've got that flexibility to say that we need, given that we're committed behind it, that we need to manage it in the total context. And that's why I mentioned about innovation and technology, because we can't truly expect to pay more for sustainability in the future. It's not sustainable to keep adding costs. We have to find the right ways in which to build sustainability in at a competitive cost, and not the lowest cost, but a competitive cost.
I suppose I'd just like to add to that, and I think if you approach it in the right way, it actually brings value, mutual value. And I just remind you the slide I put up there, which said half of the suppliers that we questioned didn't have a target for energy, and even less had an active program. And I think we've made 3 or 4. We've taken our learnings from our energy reduction program and applied that now in 4 suppliers. And I think the average energy saving opportunity at facilities is about 40%. And ranging from cost savings of £1 to £1.5 million a year. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. What I am a bit personally concerned about is that we end up resulting in using cost as a lever to be more sustainable, rather than being able to have that more optimistic conversation is, well, if we are more sustainable, what opportunity does that deliver?
Great. All right. One last question down here, and then it'll probably be time. So if we can hold your questions, capture them, and we'll get back to them. But one more from this table.
Hi, Courtney Evans from Unilever. Just a quick question, just heading on what you just mentioned, that actually around the value proposition to suppliers. What's your messaging to them, and how do you intend to scale that messaging with your new collaboration? Is it, are you going for the gusto with the messaging and then, delivering outcomes and making those outcomes really clear at the beginning? This is what we want to achieve, and this is why we want you to do it.
Courtney, could you ask that? Phrase that again.
Yeah.
And who are you aiming it at?
I think, it's for everyone, really, but when you're dealing with your suppliers, I think what we need to think about is the value proposition to them. Why should they collaborate with us and each other? And I think a lot of that is about messaging. So are you presenting the messaging on the value proposition quite early and saying this is the outcomes that we want to achieve, and then going from that angle, or are you just saying,
Okay. So how are you communicating with suppliers to put across the value proposition that collaborating with you on sustainability is a valuable thing to do for them?
I think when we launched our pilot, we did a couple of things. We talked and we invited some of our customers to come and talk to our suppliers by way of a WebEx. So we played back to our supply chain what we're being asked to deliver. So the NHS Sustainable Development Unit, they're clear they want to reduce the carbon impact of the NHS. Tesco's are a major retailer we supply to. Clearly they've got some ambitions around reducing their environmental impact. And you know what? They buy stuff from us. And they've done the same analysis, and they show their supply chains. That's where most of their carbon footprint is, and we're right there. So first thing was passing on our customer expectations to our suppliers. And I suppose then the second lever was actually, there is an expectation, but there's real opportunity in this. And the opportunity that we think there is both from a financial perspective, a quality perspective, a delivery perspective, and plus the added value, the innovation. How do we bring new innovation that we wouldn't have got at ordinarily to increase top line sales as well as reduce the bottom line?
Okay. Well, look, I think we should call it, because the coffees and the tea and the first break is calling, and we'll be running late. I think that sets the tone very nicely for this morning. I hope you had good discussions on your table. Big round of applause, please, for Tony, Matt, and David.